I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. Hey everybody, it's just me today. Quick question, has nothing to do with my personal life whatsoever, but is there a word for the feeling when you see that your ex is dating somebody new on Instagram, but you were the one that ended things and it's been like 6 months, so you really shouldn't feel some type of way, but you do feel some type of way, and you're like happy for them, obviously, because they're a great person, but also like you're kind of sad for you, but like, are you sad for you? Because you are doing well, but like, are you going to die alone? Anyway, if you guys have like a word for that, let me know. I was thinking about this for no particular reason as I was on my way to JBHH, which stands for Just Because Happy Hour. This is put on by my friends Alicia and Alex, and they've started it before the pandemic. It's this very cool networking event, and I bring it up because I think it can be translated to other industries. So there's no membership fee. There's no ticket charge. They do networking events about once a month, and there's no sponsorship. There's no announcements. They don't give out your emails to anybody. You do have to pay for your own drinks, but like, who cares? You're just going to the bar and hanging out with like your industry friends. And I love this model. It's been so helpful for me. It kind of reminds me of the last episode. If you guys listened to Elena's episode where she was talking about how you have to be so diligent about your brand and unapologetic about your brand. And they said that multiple people have asked them if they could sponsor or if they, you could make so much money if you did this, and they don't. And I just love that. So I wanted to kind of call that out if that's something that you guys want to start in your own industry. I also went to this event kind of thinking I'd talk a little bit more about like the event side of my life, but multiple people came up to me to talk about the podcast. And one guy said he learns something new every episode. So if that's all we're doing, I feel like we're doing great. Other things to talk about is, speaking of the podcast, I'm mapping out 2025. So I've mapped out, I think I'm like partway into February with guests. I'm trying to get the rest of Q1 done in the next few weeks. So if you have a guest suggestion, if there's something you think would be really good on here, if you think you'd be good on here, or if you have article suggestions like throughout the time, if something comes up you think would be interesting to hear about, please reach out. Please send it to me. I want this to be a conversation. The information is in my show notes. Also, I'll just say it. It's at The Weekly Seattle on Instagram or info@theweeklyseattle for email. What am I doing tonight? Thank you so much for asking. I'm going to the GeekWire holiday party. We had John Cook on, the co-founder. I'm going to go to that with my friend Maureen Wiley-Clough, who we also had on the podcast. She runs her own. Her and I are going to go, and it's going to be really fun. And that's why I need to get through this episode so I can go do that. Then tomorrow I'm emceeing a holiday party, which I think will be really fun. A friend reached out for me to do that. And what else to say? Oh yeah, one more thing before we get into the news is that the podcast was featured on Puget Sound Business Journal, which is so cool. I mean, I know I used to work for them, so maybe it's like slightly less cool, but I think it just kind of validates that this is like a real thing and not like some silly little project. I mean, it is a fun project, but it just felt good. The other reason why it felt good, because when I worked there, I wrote the scripts for the events. So I wrote the questions that we'd ask the honorees and oftentimes the questions that we asked in like panel discussions, not all of them, but like a lot of them. And there was like my editor-in-chief would always tease me about this, and we'd always debate because he was like, oh, events don't break news, because that's like what the newsroom wants to do. And I was like, yeah, but we're putting on a show. And so I'd ask questions like, take us back to that phone call that you got in your dorm room that changed your life. And he would want to ask like questions that would break news. So it was this constant battle that we'd tease each other about. And so when this happened and he wrote, his paper wrote the article, it was fun to kind of reach out to him and be like, see, I can break news too. The other thing I will say though, like this is exciting for me, yes, but it's also such a bummer because the article was about restaurants closing, and that is sad. And I think Elena's awesome, and I had so much fun on the episode, and I'm glad she was able to share that and felt comfortable sharing that. But I think we can hold two things at the same time, right? Like, that is sad news, and it is fun to have your name in print, So today's episode, we're going to do a whole washed up news stories. Where are they now? Washed up celebrities. Where are they now? Weirdly, there's like 8 or 9 articles that came out that are about things that we've talked about before. I don't know. I did not plan this, but it worked out really well. So I'm going to kind of go through those pretty quickly, I think, and give you guys a little bit of an update about what's going on. So are you ready? Yes, let's go. Have I had a cider? Sure I have. Here we go. First up, Visit Seattle. What to say about Visit Seattle? I went to this brunch this week, and it was their annual holiday brunch. I saw my buddy Rick, who works at PSBJ, and he wrote an article which is great. I didn't have to take notes, but I'm kidding. I did take notes. It's this annual event, and they talked a lot about FIFA World Cup that's coming in 2026. If you recall, this is a follow-up from the episode with Troy Anderson, where we talked a lot about kind of the process of getting FIFA and what that means. But this event really dived a lot more into it. So basically, we've got club games in 2025 and then World Cup in 2026. So when you think about club games, think about like the Sounders. Clubs like that will be playing in Seattle and other places. And so that's going to be a big thing for us, but not quite as big, obviously, as the World Cup in 2026, which is the countries playing each other. Visit Seattle says that they think the World Cup is going to generate $930 million for King County within these 6 matches that are going to be held at Lumen Field. They expect, I'm just throwing some data out at you guys, they expect about 750,000 people visiting downtown. Amazing, because we want to revitalize downtown. But what was kind of interesting about that is that the woman on stage was like, yeah, half of these people have tickets, other half are just here for vibes. And I was like, oh, love that. But why that's important is because Visit Seattle wants to get these people that don't have tickets to other parts of Seattle. They want to get them in different types of neighborhoods. So they're going to also promote existing events. So think like Solstice Parade, which the moderator was like, oh, their eyes will be wide open if they go to the Fremont Solstice Parade. If you haven't been, moderator was Jen Mueller, by the way. She's awesome. And they also want to develop augmented reality, like think like Pokemon Go, if you guys remember that. And then they're also going to offer swag and stuff like that. So they're really going to try and drive people to other neighborhoods, which I loved. And it's all kind of part of their approach to this is that they want to approach it like World's Fair, if you guys remember that. But they want this to be like, hey, this is our time to be in the global spotlight, and we want to really show off Seattle. So I really loved their approach there. They also talked about how they want to partner with Vancouver a lot because there's going to be games in Canada, US, and Mexico. But of course, we're really close to Vancouver. So they're talking to the Vancouver team constantly. They say they have like weekly calls with Vancouver and other cities about, how do we help with the border crossing? How can we make that more smooth? Like, what can we do together? And again, I love that they're working with nearby cities. Last few stats here is that it's going to generate $100 million in state and local taxes, and it'll be $650 million in direct spending. This is all an estimate, but yes, FIFA World Cup 2026 is going to be a really good thing for our city. Let's move on. Next up, Kroger and Albertsons. Have you guys seen the messy breakups on TikTok? I'm watching one right now where they both are posting about it and it's just uncomfortable. That's exactly what Kroger and Albertsons are doing. So when you think Kroger, think Fred Meyer and QFC. When you think Albertsons, think obviously Albertsons, Safeway, and those Hagen brands. They originally were like, hey, let's team up. This is Survivor. Let's team up and go against Costco, Amazon, and Walmart. Because together, we'd make up about 13% of the U.S. grocery market compared to Walmart, who controls 22%, which I found interesting that they are that much more than these individual companies. Now, so Kroger's a little bit of a bigger company. So Kroger was the one that was going to acquire Albertsons for close to $25 billion. And in that agreement, they agreed, in order to not be too much of a monopoly, they agreed to sell hundreds of stores to what's called C&S wholesaler grocers, who own Grand Union and Piggly Wiggly. It's so weird to say that in a business. Piggly Wiggly. Anyway, the FTC in 2 states, so Washington and Colorado, were like, yeah, I don't think so. They sued to block the merger. I don't think this should go through. And a federal judge, blocks the merger. So this was kind of the news that came out 2 days ago, is that this merger isn't going through. It was blocked. And then we kind of thought okay, that's the end of that. Oh no, Albertsons goes, oh yeah, well, F you, we're suing you, Kroger, because the deal fell through. We're going to sue you for $600 million. And this is probably because Albertsons isn't doing well, right? They're the ones that wanted to get bought by Kroger. And they're saying they didn't use, quote, best efforts, and they didn't take any and all actions to complete the deal. Basically, you didn't try hard enough in this relationship, so you owe me $600 million. And Kroger, of course, is coming back and being like, these claims are baseless and without merit, especially since they breached the contract first. Anyway, it's a classic, messy, public divorce, breakup? I don't know. Anyway, that's where we're at with the Kroger Albertsons stuff. Now let's move on to Expedia. This is crazy that this article came out today because this was something we covered in our very first episode. There was an employee of Expedia in Seattle's campus that put out these spy cameras in the bathrooms. And I call them a oneer, but it's a gender neutral. You open the door, there's one bathroom, one sink, you lock the door, whatever. So he puts in these cameras, and And another employee discovers it, goes to the security company, which is a third-party company. It's a Sweden company called Securitas, and says, hey, I think I found some cameras in the bathroom. And they're like, they don't believe him. And it's like, okay, well, you can like follow apart and like go fuck yourself. So then they like check the bathrooms. They don't see anything. They take pictures, whatever, but they don't remove the cameras, which is so weird. So then like the next day or the day later, the employee goes back to check the bathrooms and the camera's gone. So he's like, oh, okay, cool. Like security took care of it. But they didn't, because the actual guy that put the cameras there is the one who took them out because he got scared. So a month goes by and the guy that put the cameras there is like, okay, I think it's safe now. I'm going to go put them back. Puts them back and the employees discover it again, then go back to Securitas, the company, and finally the company reports it to the police. So this is a story we covered a long time ago. Why this is back in the news is that more than 60 victims have been identified, and they're filing a lawsuit against Securitas, the security company, because they're like, dude, you did not handle this well. I found this interesting because I don't know a lot about the law, so if you do, maybe reach out. But I was curious why Expedia didn't sue the security company, because Expedia is the one that hired them. And why the victims went straight to the company. I don't know. Maybe that was a better strategy. I'm not sure. If you know more, let me know. Next story. HomeStreet Bank merger does not go through. What? Another breakup? Can you guys tell the theme of this? This was not my plan. When something's on your mind, it's like all that you see everywhere. Okay. So HomeStreet Bank doesn't merge with this other bank called Sunflower Bank. HomeStreet is in Seattle. Sunflower is in Dallas. If we're getting really particular, this Dallas bank is actually owned by a holding company in Denver called FirstSun, but that's just way too confusing. So Seattle and Denver banks not combining. Unlike Albertsons and Kroger, these two were like, yeah, it didn't work out. Like, I wish you the best. We're just like not a fit. And they agreed to terminate on November 18th. So they actually didn't agree they didn't fit, but the judge said that they don't fit. So they didn't get approval from the federal and state regulators. And so they're like, well, we tried. But there was concerns of high interest rates with these two banks combining, and that they both had a lot of commercial real estate loans. There's another article I'm going to link in the show notes here, is that some analysts say it's not that simple. There's some other reasons based on their size or other things if you want to read about it. So no bank merger. Next up, how many more do I have? I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we have a few. 3 or 4. All right, iCap. Again, so crazy this is coming back up, but iCap is something we covered with Marcel Van Camp's episode way, way early on. And they were a Ponzi scheme. And so they were a Ponzi scheme. They claimed bankruptcy. And the article that comes out is saying that they're emerging from bankruptcy because they are going to do this liquidation plan to repay all the investors. I feel like you don't see that often, of a Ponzi scheme actually being able to pay back these investors. And how much are we talking about here? We're talking about $230 million between a couple thousand investors over the past few years. So they said that they were going to be investing in real estate projects, which they sort of did, but not really. And instead it was used to pay old investors as a classic scheme. There was another company that came in that analyzed their books and said it was a Ponzi scheme. And then there was a federal judge that was like, yeah, bet it is. So yeah, they're coming out of bankruptcy to pay back all their investors. And then who knows what's going to happen later with that. But that's iCap. Next up is Boeing layoffs. Guys, I don't know. Is it just me? But I'm like kind of bored of talking about Boeing because it's just like constantly in the news. We had this whole strike and then it finally ended. And then the new article that's out is that they're laying off more people. So they're laying off 400 people. That starts in February. And this is part of their attempt to lay off 17,000 people nationwide. But prior to that, not that long ago, they laid off 2,000 employees in November. Like, who the fuck are making our planes if everyone's gone? That's my question. But they've also not restarted their 737 MAX production because after the strike ended, because they want to kind of train up their staff and such, which I'm like, yeah, I think after losing thousands of people, we should maybe reevaluate the system and the process. The last thing I'll say about that is that the FAA capped them at 38 airplanes a month. Can somebody cap my events a month or like work a month? That would be great. So do I feel awesome about flying after all these layoffs? No, but it does make sense. I mean, they lost a shit ton of money in their strikes and they're just trying to right size, I guess. But it doesn't make me feel good. Two Seattle colleges merge. That's right. We've got Seattle University combining with Cornish College of the Arts. This is such a callback. This is such a where are they now in so many reasons. So Seattle University president is Eduardo Penalver. We had him on the podcast, which was awesome. And then Cornish College of the Arts, the interim president is Emily Parkhurst, who has been on the podcast twice, who's my old boss and a mentor of mine. And it's just so funny that all these worlds are colliding. The other reason why this is a callback is if you're an OG listener, one time I was supposed to have the president at the time of Cornish College of the Arts on, and he had to go to the ER, urgent care. So I don't know, he was sick, couldn't be on. And so they're like, we'll give you this like dean of the school. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll take it. Had no idea who he was, didn't know anything. I was like, whatever. It's Friday. I have to get an episode out. I stupidly called this podcast The Weekly. So we got to get something out. And honestly, he's like one of my favorite episodes. It's James Falzoni. He has such a professor voice that I was like, I could listen to you talk all day, like keep going. And it was really cool to kind of see the connection between the music world and the business world, or the arts world and the business world. And anyway, that I feel like is an episode you could go back to. But back to the news stories that these colleges are combining. So Seattle University is taking over Cornish College of the Arts. Seattle University is one of the largest private universities in Washington. And to give you kind of a context of size, they've had about 8,000 people enrolled over the past decade. They've hovered kind of around 8,000. Cornish, on the other hand, was about 800 about a decade ago, and they've dropped a little bit closer to 500 people. So they're much, much smaller. So this acquisition does make sense. And I think it's also going to provide the Cornish students more opportunities in terms of more clubs or like study abroad. There's just like more opportunities that you can experience while maintaining the arts education. This is going to take in effect in May of 2025, again, unless any kind of state, regional, or federal regulators need to decline that for some reason. But I personally don't see that happening. But yeah, I'm very proud of Emily for negotiating, and Eduardo. I love that they're working together and they made this deal. So congrats to them. Okay, one more story. So Doxo is this company I covered with Coral Garnick Duckin, and the FTC sued this company Doxo. Doxo is this company that it's kind of like a centralized bill payment hub of sorts. Like you pay them and they pay like all your bills. That's what I'm imagining from what I can read. And I mean, they offer like other services, but that's kind of like their big thing. But FTC was like, hey, you're making it really confusing with your website. Like people think that they're paying their bills, but they're really not. They're like signing up for something and paying these fees and such. But the Doxo comes out. The reason why this article comes out this week is that Doxo's like, listen, this is a whole disagreement about font size. Like we're disagreeing about font size. This has nothing to do with a scam. We're not a scam. We're not trying to scam people out of money. You guys are just mad about our font size. And they're also like, look at the rest of our website. We have our disclaimers everywhere. Like we are pretty clear everywhere. And also there was another case and this judge ruled in our favor, and everything you found on our website that you were mad about, like we fixed, like, please let us go play, mom. That's how I imagine it. So that's what the article is the Doxo is saying, please dismiss this bullshit to this federal judge. And we'll find out if they dismiss it or if this keeps going. Sarah emailed in and asked a question about Nordstrom. I had covered that the Nordstrom was going to go private. And is there an update? No update that I can find. I Googled around a bit and there's some talk on Reddit, but I don't feel like that's something I can talk about on the podcast. But no news articles about Nordstrom going private. So there's that update, Sarah. Lastly, before I do my closing, I want to talk about a couple openings here in Seattle. So Museum of Illusions is open. That's something we talked about in another episode. Regular tickets are $27 and it's located on 5th and Union. It's really hard to describe on the podcast, like what actually that is, but it seems like one of those places that's very Instagram-y worthy. And it's located just right near Fifth Avenue Theater, which, by the way, is playing Mary Poppins. I went to see it. I loved it. Definitely recommend. So Museum of Illusions and also, of course, Mary Poppins. The other update about openings is We Rise Wines is almost ready. So if you guys remember the episode with Jamila Conley, she is one of those classic, like, worked at F5, worked in the tech industry for years, and was just like, fuck this, I'm getting out. I'm going to start a little wine tasting room. Well, I don't know if it's little. I haven't been there. And It's on 2nd and Stewart. I messaged her before I started recording. I asked if there's anything I could share on this episode, and she said that they're doing final inspections and they'll be announcing an opening date very soon. The other last opening information is In-N-Out. I had covered this way, way early on with Rob Smith, and the articles that came out recently is saying that In-N-Out is going to be opening, quote, by 2025. Now, I don't know what that means. Like, by January 1st or like in 2025. They have not given an actual date, but they just said by 2025. Okay, we're going to close out. And I know I close out with advice a lot, and this is advice, sure, but it's also just something that's like been kind of on my mind a lot lately. And I want to play this clip from a TikTok that I saw from Sarah Silverman. She's a comedian, but I think she has her own podcast. Anyway, I'm going to play this clip and then I'll explain a little bit of why I chose it.
Not knowing what you want can be very paralyzing. And sometimes you just have to make a choice, and it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's just a choice. It moves you forward. I always quote this one line from Sunday in the Park with George in a lyric in a song called Move On. That she says, the choice may be mistaken. The choosing is not. You got to move on. So it's like, sometimes you got to just make a choice. Maybe it's not the right choice, but it gets you to the next place. You learn something. You learn that was a good choice. Or no, it wasn't a good choice. I want to do this instead. But just make it. Otherwise, you just sit there paralyzed. It's like someone who writes, who wants to write. They want to be a writer, and they just can't get themselves to write because they want it to be so perfect that it's paralyzing. Write the bad version. Then you have something to work off of. And I think that's analogous to just making a choice. If you're feeling stuck in life, make a choice. Take a job. Do something that brings you to this new place where you don't know anyone, or, and then decide you hate it and you're going to do something else. Or, oh my God, I love this. Or I met this person who does that. It's what life is. It's a big mystery. Sit on the edge of your seat. See what happens.
Such a good reminder. This is honestly why I chose a venue I chose for an event I'm planning. I just was so stuck and like dragging my feet and like couldn't decide what was going to be the best choice. And I was like, I just have to make a choice. Sometimes you just got to do it. Just got to jump and make a move forward. Maybe it's the wrong move, but at least you're going forward. So thanks for listening, everybody. I'm heading out to a party. Bye. This has been The Weekly, with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.